After we stir up this controversy, you'll be sure to want to have me back.
We'll have to come back and refute you, yeah, inshallah.
إنك لا تهدي من أحببت ولكن الله يهدي من يشاء.
Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi, it's John Fontaine. Just before we begin the podcast, please make sure you click subscribe and also set your notifications. And make sure you check out the earlier podcasts. We've up to around 40 podcasts so far. There's lots of podcasts there for you to benefit from. Make sure you check that out. Also, if you can go to the John Fontaine YouTube channel as well, click subscribe, set your notifications, and also enjoy the other videos. There's a Fiqh of Love series, a series on Christianity, and other videos regarding Dawah. Also, if you'd like to support the podcast by supporting us financially with the equipment and the travel costs and the running costs, not just of the podcast, but also the other Dawah activities I'm involved in, please support on the Patreon account. Jazakallah khair. Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. So Sheikh, after your experience in Medina, I mean, I speak to many students who have, graduated. Maybe they've spent 6, maybe 7, maybe at a push 10 years. And it's difficult to leave after 10 years. I mean, traveling back to the States after 21 years must have been difficult, Sheikh, subhanAllah. And how was it like just integrating back into the US? I mean, it must have been a different US, 20 years on, totally different.
Well, it was a different U.S. because we had a very different president. We had a reality, TV star as a president, and so the whole reality of America changed. When I say the reality changed, what I mean is that it's a very and continues to be a very divided nation. And I just don't recall it ever being that way. So I spent 21 years in Medina, but it wasn't 21 years straight. I still came back many summers. Now, there were many summers I didn't come back. It was a 5-year stretch when I did not come back at all to the United States. 5 years, straight that I stayed in Medina. For several reasons. And then, so it wasn't like I had this picture of 1996 in my head, right? And then I came back, 21 years later, and I'm like, wait a minute, what just happened to the universe? It wasn't like that because I was still coming back. But it was a very different experience. In fact, when Trump was elected president, we, as a family, we kind of considered not going back to the United States. And kind of just not wanting to deal with, some actually what's happening right now, which is just like total chaos in certain places, right? And I mean, a lot of rumblings of even a civil war, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect us from harm. It was difficult, but I also think that maybe staying longer actually made it easier, right? So I feel like after that 21 years, even with my children being older than being university age, some of them, my parents, my father died in 97, like I told you, he was ill. But my mother and my wife's mother, being older and actually, having that opportunity to say, hey, we need to spend some time with them and really show them Islam, not just talk to them about Islam, but like live Islam with them. So many different dynamics and factors, and obviously, praying to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for his guidance and making istikhara, it made it easier, right? It made it easier to come back to the United States, made it easier to make that decision to come back to the United States. And also, two of my very close friends and companions and, who studied with me in Medina had already preceded me in coming back. And we just saw how we could work together to finally do something a little different. The whole individual celebrity dawah, social media sheikh and all that type of stuff. we just weren't. That just wasn't the vibe we wanted. We felt like through working together that we could create something significant. That we could do something, that we can make some significant change. For our particular region. And so I felt good about that. The one thing that I think is important to say here is that a lot of people don't realize what it means to study for 21 years, right? If that was any other field, if that was medicine, I'd be a surgeon somewhere, making millions of dollars, right? The uncertainty that comes along with, okay, you studied 21 years, you've got a doctorate degree in your field, but there's no track for you, right? Like, you are basically, when you finish any traditional form of study, the one job that you can get is imam. You're just an imam, right? But I did not feel like, and still don't, I didn't feel like that was the best way to use my skill set, right? Imams have a very difficult job. They are involved in the lives of the people who pray with them, right? They're involved in their marriages. They're involved in, with their children. They're the ones that perform the marriages and perform the janazas and do the counseling, right? All of these things. And I didn't go to school for pastoral care, right? My track was one of academia. And in Saudi, had I been in Saudi, like all of the rest of my Saudi classmates, I'd be teaching in the Islamic University of Medina. That's the natural course. Unfortunately for us, and I can only speak about the United States because I really don't know what the situation in England is, but I imagine it's pretty much the same. We haven't created those institutions that value scholarship and therefore promote scholarship. So what do I mean by that? Imagine if my sheikh at the University of Medina had to be an imam at a masjid in order to, have a meaningful way to live, right? Or to have the type of funds that he needs just so he can study, so that he can continue studying. Right? No, my mashayikh across the board were free to read, teach, write, do revision with one another, and then repeat the cycle. Read, teach, write, and do. That's what they did. That is how you create scholarship, right? And that's how you create scholars. Why is it that we do have people who graduated in the 1980s, in the 1990s? Why do we call them our scholars? But why is there such a disparity between the knowledge that they have and the knowledge that we've taken from our scholars in the Middle East? Why is there such a disparity? The reality is because they're not free to continue on a path of scholarship. Being an imam is not a path of scholarship.
Yeah, they're busy being like the local imam, and
they're busy being the imam, which is a good thing. I'm not knocking. We need imams. We need good imams. We need knowledgeable imams. We need imams who can connect, with their people, right? But we also need scholars. And so we need institutions that support scholarship, that free people up who have these advanced degrees, who have that aspiration, to continue to study their deen until they die. We need we need those institutions that support that. As when I was contemplating my return back to the United States, this new position kind of was created at many of the masajid in America. It was called resident scholar, scholar in residence, right? Which, back in the 90s, even in the early 2000s, I never heard of the term, right? I never heard of the term. And now, the larger masajid in America actually tend to have 3 full-time positions. So one is for the imam, one is for the scholar in residence, and the third is for a youth director, full-time for a lot of the masajid. But again, this wasn't the case way back when. So I had been offered a position at one masjid in Philadelphia to come in as an executive director. So it's interesting because when you think of masjid, you don't think of executive director, right? But or just about all of the masajid in the United States of America are registered nonprofits, with the government. So a nonprofit entity, at the end of the day, has to have a structure like any other corporation. So it has to have bylaws and so on and so forth. So I said that I would accept. I told them I'm not going to be an imam. I just don't want that kind of responsibility, and I don't want the traditional imam versus the board type of relationship. I'm not built like that. That's just going to be very problematic. So, alhamdulillah, the masjid in Philadelphia, where I'm still at until today, alhamdulillah, I'm still the executive director at the masjid. It's called United Muslim Masjid. They also offered me a position on the board itself. So they said that you'd be the executive, I'll be the executive director. I'll also be on the board, and then I recommended to them the imam that I would like to hire, and he went through the process. Alhamdulillah, he was one of the brothers that was with me in Medina, who used to study with me in Medina. Alhamdulillah, I don't really study under me. Like we used to study with Sheikh together, and we used to do a lot of things together. Alhamdulillah, and that brother's Imam Hanif Faust. He's a beautiful person. He's from California. And he's integrated very well into the community in Philadelphia. He's done a tremendous job, alhamdulillah. I couldn't ask for a better imam, for somebody to just, the way he's connected with the community. But that was also very important to me, that I wasn't anywhere by myself. That feeling of, number one, a lot of brothers, I've seen this happen. So there's across the board, right? So there's some where they go somewhere, they're the only sheikh in the area or whatever like that. It goes to their heads. They start thinking that there's somebody that they're not. They want to get fatwa and do ijtihad and all this type of stuff, and they're not qualified. The other scenario, and this is more what I was scared of, was you get burnt out real quick when you don't have anybody else that you can study with, that you can, continue to learn your religion with. Somebody that you can just say, hey, listen, man, I just can't deal with the football this week. You got it. I just got to get away for a minute. So, and then so that was the one situation I had. The other situation was I was hired as the scholar in residence at a masjid in South Jersey. Okay, so Philadelphia is connected to South Jersey by a bridge. There's the Delaware River in between us. You cross the Delaware River, you're in New Jersey. So it's approximately 25 minutes between the two masjids. Or the other one was more like an Islamic center, not exactly a masjid. Anyway, what I saw there, we thought we were going to be able to make things work with that particular Islamic center. It was a different demographic, and a lot of things did not happen the way that I was told, it was going to be. And alhamdulillah, it is what it is. Time went by, and another opportunity came up, which I thought was going to be a very good opportunity for me to use the skill set that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala blessed me to gain, while overseas. And that was the opportunity to come on as a coordinator for research at Yaqeen Institute. And so that was, I was in the talks, for some time about working with Yaqeen, but I didn't actually, start until early 2019.
Yaqeen, this is with Sheikh Umar Suleiman's institute, and I think many people have had some criticisms about Yaqeen Institute, and people were, I think there was kind of mixed emotions, and people were a bit confused really to see you kind of working with Yaqeen. So I kind of wanted to ask you about that, really. I mean, how did that come along, you working with Yaqeen?
Okay. I think to answer this question, I actually need to, I think we need to rewind for a minute, right? So I've known Omar Suleiman for several years. Before he was Dr. Omar Suleiman, as he is now, when they used to call him Imam Omar Suleiman. But no, I've known him for several years, and he talked to me about Yaqeen Institute before it was actually a thing, right? So I'm aware of some of the philosophy behind the institute as a whole. And I think that for people to understand what my role is with Yaqeen, you kind of have to know, what is Yaqeen Institute anyway? Like, where did it come about? So if you'll recall, I told you that 9/11 was a game changer, right? 9/11 changed Islam. Well, it changed the world. It didn't change Islam. It changed the world, and it put Islam under a very bright spotlight. But obviously what happened for a lot of Muslims after 9/11, they were being painted with a very broad brush. Terrorism, Muslims are terrorists. They do these acts of terrorism. They are violent, to the end. And I remember when I first started beginning to read academic studies about Muslims in America and what was really happening in America, and I was shocked. I read an academic article by a Yemeni American that said that 53% or 54% of Muslims or people who had accepted Islam after 9/11, that they apostatized. They left Islam. And I was like, subhanAllah, this is troubling. What is it, what is it that's causing them? First of all, they're accepting Islam, so something is drawing their attention to this religion. Something is entering into their heart. They're feeling good about it, and they become a Muslim. What is it that's causing them to leave the faith? And you start thinking about those hadith, where the Prophet ﷺ sends this letter to Heraclius or Heraclius, and then he asks, well, do any of them leave the faith after they accept the faith, right? And he's like, no, none of them leave the faith. And he says, well, that and such is the case when the love of Iman or the beauty of Iman enters into the heart, right? So I'm thinking, okay, what's going on? Anyway, take it a little more, forward. You start getting these studies about how the percentage of American Muslims who were raised in Islam and no longer identify as Muslims. So one of the latest studies that I read on that was back in 2018 when Pew, are you familiar with Pew, the research group? So they came out with a study about religion in general in the United States. And part of that study was about the Muslims. And it said that 23% of those who were raised as Muslims no longer identify with the faith. It's a huge number. Huge. 23% is more than 1 in every 5. And so you start thinking, subhanAllah, that's not a small number, right? Okay. Now, the interesting thing about that is that they also, in that same study, said that the Muslims' numbers are not actually dropping because 22 to 23% of adult Muslims are converts, which means that these ones are leaving and these ones are coming. It's almost like Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is just replacing them, subhanAllah. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, and if they turn back, then Allah will replace them. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will replace them with a people, with another people. So, I mean, you can look at it from that angle, and you can take a very apathetic approach and just say, man sha'a falyu'min wa man sha'a falyakfur. Whoever, as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, whoever wills, let them believe, and whoever wills, let them reject faith, right? So, if you take the attitude, I'm saying as a diet though, if you take that attitude, which to be honest with you, John, I understand that may be some people's approach, because if you're like, for example, if you're an imam in a masjid, you got your hands full. It really doesn't matter that these people have left Islam or these people haven't or whatever like that. You really do have your hands full, right? So your concern may not necessarily be outside of the masjid, right? Your concern a lot of times, as it should be. And I know this is a digression, but you need to let me digress for a minute. I think that one of the biggest problems, one of the biggest misunderstandings that we have as people who try to work to promote Islam one way or another is that if a person is not doing what I'm doing, then I feel like they're not doing anything. Or I feel like what they're doing is not as valuable as what I'm doing. So this guy is out there, subhanAllah, he spends the majority of his time trying to get people into the fold of Islam. He may not have a whole lot of knowledge, but he knows the basics of Islam. He knows what he needs to know, right, to teach somebody about the Shahadatain, about Tawheed, and so forth. Okay, his role, he doesn't have as much knowledge as this guy. He didn't study, for 20 years or whatever like that. But his role is very important because he's bringing people to Islam. Okay, the guy that's out there calling people to Islam, he feels like more people should be doing what he's doing. So he kind of may belittle the role of the imam. What does he do? He gives a 15-minute speech on Friday. So he may kind of belittle the role of the imam, who in turn, who's working with these people all the time, may belittle the role of the guy who sits in his library 8 hours a day and who's reading about Islam so that he can write, and so on and so forth. Yeah. So I think when we realize that, alhamdulillah, we're all playing for the same team, we have different roles, right? I know a little bit about basketball. I kind of grew up on basketball, right? So, you got Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, right? Like I was talking about. He's 7'2". He's supposed to be down there by the basket. Not supposed to be somewhere shooting 3-pointers. And he definitely shouldn't be dribbling the ball up the court because somebody can take the ball from the other team. That's not his role, right? His role is to be down there, score those points down by the basket. And so I think that what has happened for us, man, unfortunately, is that we follow what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told us not to do. Allah Azza wa Jalla says in the Quran, قَالَتِ الْيَهُودُ لَيْسَتِ النَّصَارَى عَلَى شَيْءٍ وَقَالَتِ النَّصَارَى لَيْسَتِ الْيَهُودُ عَلَى شَيْءٍ وَهُمْ يَتْلُونَ الْكِتَابَ. Right? The Jews said that the Christians, they're not on anything. And the Christians said the Jews are not on anything. وَهُمْ يَتْلُونَ الْكِتَابَ. They read in the book. Sheikh al-Islam Ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah ta'ala, when he talks about the imitation of the people of the scripture, a lot of times we think about imitating people, we think about in dress, we think about, okay, don't wear a cross, we think about external manifestations of that imitation. Sheikh al-Islam talks about the internal as well, the internal manifestations, the mentality. Don't follow them in that mentality. Just because these people don't see it the exact same way that you see it. Don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. They've got a lot of good that they're doing, just because they don't see it the way that you see it. So the reality is that that we have to recognize that we have different roles that we have to play, and that we're all, inshallah, we're all fighting for the same thing, and that we're all on the same team. Now, I went into a long digression and forgot exactly what I digressed from. So I need you to bring me back to the point that I was.
Don't worry, I'm not letting you get away that easy, Sheikh. I was basically asking about your kind of work with Yaqeen.
I remember that, John. I remember now. So let's just go back for a second. So looking at this, I'm saying this because I'm intimately aware of why Yaqeen Institute was founded. Like what the catalyst was. So at this point, Sheikh Ahmad Suleiman was talking to me about many of the things that were happening in America with those Muslims who were leaving Islam, and that there's this whole Islamophobia industry, which I'm keenly aware of, by the way, and I think that Yeah, from early on, man. From the time I was in my master's, actually, from the time I was doing my master's, I started collecting these Islamophobic books. Right, I wanted to see what were their arguments really about against Islam. So I have an extensive library just with Islamophobic books, and with so-called weird type ex-Muslims who then go on to sell their stories, because a lot of them, this is strictly commercial profit and gain for them, right? But I don't think that we had a very concerted effort as Muslims to bring together, I'm saying at least in the United States, to bring together the type of minds that could collectively respond to the Islamophobia industry, right? And that is what Yaqeen was about. I mean, to start. This problem of people leaving Islam, Muslims having internalized the message of the Islamophobes, right? And then being affected by it so much that it causes them to renounce their faith, and perhaps there were other reasons as well. There was a need, what seemed to be a need, to bring together, in the language of Yaqeen, to bring together academics, people in the academy, Western trained. Now, just give me a second, because you look at them; these are not people who are classically trained in the sciences of Islam, but they do know the academy inside out. They know how Orientalism works inside out. They know the weaknesses, right? If you start pairing them with people who have studied Islam classically, right, and other, let's just call them intellectuals, Muslim intellectuals, then you may be able to start crafting the type of responses that are going to be more effective in battling, Islamophobia, and hopefully more effective.
But wouldn't that be one of the criticisms, though, that people are not kind of dealing with it in a classically trained way? Although some people might be classically trained, Islamically classically trained, so you're getting kind of a very Western kind of academic response, rather than, this is a big criticism that people have, to the extent of, even to the extent of people saying Yaqeen kind of watering down the religion, supporting LGBT and all these type of issues, and you can kind of see where that kind of claim is coming from, really, when
Okay. So I think that there's two larger things that you say. One is that Yaqeen is more taking a more Western approach than a classical Islamic approach, right, to dealing with some of these issues. And then the other thing that you said is that Yaqeen is watering down the religion and supporting LGBTQ and so on and so forth.
I was saying this is like what some people may say.
No, okay, all right. So I'm not saying that you're saying it. I'm saying that you're conveying some of the critiques. That you're conveying some of the critiques, and I'll, inshallah, I'll be able to I'll address both topics. Again, and I don't want to dismiss anything. I don't just want to say, oh no, this is just coming from thin air.
The thing is, what it is, Sheikh, I recently did a podcast with Daniel Hakikature. I've not actually released it yet. But he kind of addresses like a lot of these like modern doubts in the West and things like that. He does quite a good job in a lot of areas, and not just him, but other people. Students of knowledge, sheikhs that I know, have also shown their kind of concern for Yaqeen. So it's just, I just wanted to kind of get your take on that, really.
So my take on, I specifically I can't specifically talk about what everybody has said, because I really don't know, to be honest with you. I can specifically talk about some of the claims that were made in an article that was written by Daniel Haqiqa Joe about Yaqeen Institute, because a good friend of mine sent me that article and asked me right before Ramadan. He asked me what I thought about the article, and so I skimmed it very quickly. I skimmed the article very quickly. It came off as kind of tabloidish with the pictures and the this and the that, and some things caught my eye, and I felt immediately that there was some exaggeration there. So I told the brother, I said, look, I'm not gonna have a chance to look at this, in any detail, definitely until at least after Ramadan, but I will try to get to it, and then I'll take my time to try to look at some of these the criticisms that have been made, because I think the approach that we as Muslims should take in general is that approach that was taught to us by Amir al-Mu'mineen Umar ibn al-Khattab radiyallahu ta'ala anhu, who said, Rahimallahu imran ahda ilayya uyubi. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala have mercy on the one who gives a gift. He gifts for me. He shows me my faults. So I think that our approach should always be, okay, if I'm criticized, whether it's me as a person, whether it's John Fontaine or this guy, that guy, and somebody's criticizing, to take a step back, try to look at it as unbiased as possible. Now, obviously, if you're involved, there's an emotional element to it, but you do have to try your best to be unbiased, because there may be things that are in fact valid. So I would tell you that I looked at a summary of the critiques, and I was very disappointed. I'll be honest with you, I was very disappointed because I have spoken with Daniel before once. I don't have like any long-standing relationship with him, but I don't have a bad relationship with him or anything like that. So I was disappointed by what I saw to be academic dishonesty, like a lack of integrity, in fact, in presenting the information. So, and I'll give you some examples, because these ones I actually know. Now, I mean, if there's some specific claims that you think need to be addressed, then you can ask and maybe, but I'll give you an example. There was a paper that was written about evolution, but not human evolution from Adam and Eve, right? Anyway, long story short, the paper itself I hadn't initially read, but I saw the line where Daniel quotes the author saying that Adam and Eve are, mythical figures or something along those lines, right? So basically, his claim is that Yaqeen Institute, he says, for example, on this particular post, that, do you know that Yaqeen Institute says that Adam and Eve are mythical figures? And I was like, that's kufr. Like, let's not sugarcoat it. If we say that Adam and Eve, who are Adam is specifically mentioned in the Quran, and Adam and Eve, who are specifically mentioned in Sunnah of the Prophet, if we say that they are mythical figures, that's cool. So I went back to the article, and I was astonished, because what the author actually said was, if one were to argue that Adam and Eve are, mythical figures, okay? Basically, he's saying, then that would invalidate their argument that says that science can disprove their existence, right? So this is what the author is saying. Not only is he saying, for argument's sake, he actually puts "if" at the beginning of his sentence. In the quote, if you look at the article that's published against Yaqeen, they cut off the "if" and capitalize the letter of the next word, making it look like that is the beginning of the sentence. Okay, so even if you're quoting, if you're quoting somebody else and they have a capital letter and you want to put it in the beginning of your sentence, right? Then you have to put that in between brackets. Or if they have a lowercase letter and you want to put it at the beginning of the sentence, do you have to put that in brackets to indicate, that you're quoting? No. Erase the entire word if, okay? And then capitalize the next letter and cut off the end of the sentence to make it look like the author was saying that Adam and Eve are mythical figures. That is dishonest. And the reason why that was really disappointing to me is because this is being done in the name of preserving the deen, of protecting Islam. Since when do we protect Islam with lies? So, it's even so deep, and I have a few other things I need to say about this topic because it is really important for us to understand the scope of things. The scholars of hadith, almost across the board, would accept the narrations of the people of bid'ah with conditions, right? So with the condition that the hadith that was being narrated does not support the bid'ah that this person was accused of, right? Because then it may seem like, he's actually narrating the hadith to just support his particular view on something. And that he not be a caller to his bid'ah and so on and so forth. So there were stipulations. But the point is, they would accept with conditions the narration of Ahl al-Hadith. With the narrations of Ahl al-Bid'ah. When it comes to the liars, they don't accept the narrations. When it comes to people who lie, even if they were lying to or deceiving their animals, like if they were tricking, like some of the scholars of hadith, when they would see like somebody trick his mule into doing something, make it seem like he had food when he didn't have food, they wouldn't accept hadith. So if a person lies on the Prophet, they would call him a kadhab. Okay, a kadhab. If a person, which literally translates as a perpetual liar, right? If somebody was known to lie, but not on the Prophet ﷺ, but they were known to be deceptive and lie, then that person would be called muttaham bil kadhib. Yani he is accused of lying. Now, why is this point important? It's important because lying has always been seen, that type of deception has always been seen as a disqualifier. We don't take knowledge from you. So what happened, and I'm going to tell you, I came across another one where he put in quotation marks, Yaqeen Institute says that people have, in quotation marks, God-like powers. Yaqeen John, you or whoever else, you can search the 150 some odd articles that are on Yaqeen Institute's website. You will not find anything close to claiming that people have God-like powers. That is shirk akbar. Takes you outside of the millah of Islam. And nobody said that. The article that he's referring to, and the wording could have been better, but basically this person was talking about, from what I remember, this person was talking about at-takhalluq bi akhlaqillah, right? Which is, in other words, taking on the characteristics that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has. Now, that terminology is debatable. Some of the scholars of Islam use it, other scholars of Islam don't think it's good to use. Ibn al-Qayyim rahimahullah ta'ala talks about it extensively. And he says that there are certain characteristics that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has that he loves for us to emulate. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is Jameel, wa yuhibbul jamal. He is beautiful and he loves beauty. Allah azza wa jalla is Rafiq, wa yuhibbul rifq. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is gentle and he loves for us to be gentle. So, and Allah azza wa jalla is merciful and he loves for us to show mercy, right? So this is what we're talking about when we talk about emulating those characteristics of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. How you get God-like power out of that is beyond me from an intellectual standpoint. But then it is academic dishonesty to put that in between quotation marks because you're making somebody believe that somebody actually said that.
Yeah.
Another example, and again, the reason why I'm familiar with this is because specifically a brother who's close to Daniel, who happens to be a friend of mine, sent me the article and he said, please, I'd like to know, what you think about it. So I'm going to finish another couple points. I actually did a review for Yaqeen Institute of an article called Difference of Opinion, Where Do We Draw the Line? Or something like that. Okay? John, I am encouraging you to read that paper. It was a good paper. It lays out the methodology of Ahl Sunnah in interpreting texts. It talks about where those red lines are that we can't cross, where we don't disagree. It really does do a good a good job of laying that out academically. And I happen to, alhamdulillah, to be one of the people who reviewed that article. And in that article, the author talks about al-wala wal-bara, right? And he talks about, some key concepts related to affiliation and disassociation and who we show love for and who we show enmity for and so on and so on. To paint this picture with these big subtitles, Yaqeen Institute says that al-wala wal-bara is the aqidah of ISIS, or is a methodology of ISIS, or something like that. And basically saying that at Yaqeen Institute, there's this push for eliminating anything known as al-wala wal-bara. And also that takfir is foreign to Islam. Like, this is the claim that's being made of Yaqeen Institute. And Yaqeen, honestly, if you go back and even if you look at the stuff that Daniel's quoting, you don't understand that. Even from the stuff that he's quoting, not to mention the stuff that he doesn't quote, that he just makes kind of reference to. And what it was actually saying is that ISIS and their types make takfir of anybody who don't agree with their way, right? And that is contrary to Islam. Not that takfir as a concept is contrary to Islam, but that this one-time, application of takfir is foreign to the way of Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah. Because I've also gotten the same, things probably that you have gotten. People have sent me things. Well, how can you work with Yaqeen after this article, for example? And it's just like, okay, fair enough. I mean, let's. I feel like I know what Yaqeen is because I'm there on the other side, right? I'm not on the receiving social media side. I'm on the side where we coordinate research, where we review the articles, where we don't accept certain articles, where, to the end of it. Like, I'm on that side of the fence. So I feel like I know what Yaqeen Institute is, but obviously I'm not on social media. Like, I don't do Facebook, Instagram, whatever else is out there, TikTok, and whatever else is going on. I'm just not my flavor. Last thing that I mentioned here, and I'm sure there are many other things. I was really disappointed, and I'm going to say something else about that in a second. But the last point here that I felt was totally disqualifying, if you will, is he at one point he says that there's this author who is promoting liberalism, right? And so he brings this quote, and the quote was pretty damning, I will say. Like, it was like, wow, that's not a good look, right? If somebody actually did write that and it was published by Yaqeen Institute, there needs to be a retraction. It was like one of those things. So I go back and I look at the quote, and there it is. There's a part at the beginning of the paragraph where the author says, I don't accept, this form of liberalism because of ABCD, right? And then he says at the end of the paragraph, so this is in summary why this form of liberalism is totally incoherent and so on and so forth. So Daniel takes the middle and he says, Yaqeen says A, B, C, D. Well, the author said, I don't agree with A, B, C, D. But here he comes and he quotes it. Now, could somebody else have been, collecting the data for Daniel and he just didn't know? It's possible. But once you put your name on it, not only is it unacceptable, it happened several times. It became a pattern. And so I would just tell you, it's one of those things where now it makes it difficult for me to, you're talking about 50,000 words, right? I am now in a position where I can go back and look at these articles, and if something, needs to be changed, something needs to be pulled or something like that, then, inshallah, I can make certain suggestions, right? But I can't trust the information now. So even if he comes and he says, here's another 100 mistakes, right? It comes next week and he says, okay, forget everything I wrote up. Here's another 100 mistakes. How can I trust that information? Now, the thing is, John, the reality is that are there mistakes? Has Yaqeen, you got to understand, the Yaqeen Institute is 4 years old, right? It's still in its, I don't want to say infancy, but it's still in its beginning stages. And there were so many moving pieces in the beginning. I was not a part of that process. They had not solidified their peer review process from the beginning. But alhamdulillah, that has come a long way now, right? So to get to the point, I don't think that everything that Daniel says is a lie or everything that he says is dishonest. But some of it, without a doubt, has fallen into that category. Look, think about it like this. Allah says in the Quran, قُلْ إِنْ كَانَ لِلرَّحْمَنِ وَلَدٌ فَأَنَا أَوَّلُ الْعَابِدِينَ. Say, if Ar-Rahman had a child, then I would be the first one to worship him, right? Now, in the Arabic language, you can say لِلرَّحْمَنِ وَلَدٌ, and that's a full sentence. The Ar-Rahman has a child. And Allah said in the Quran, لِلرَّحْمَنِ وَلَدٌ. Allah has a child, right?
Yeah, you can't do it.
But you can't do that. Because Allah said, if Allah, and this is basically what Daniel's doing, when you're removing the beginning.
I want to ask you, look, I mean, would you advise people not to listen and take knowledge from that website, Muslim Skeptic, or would you advise me not to release the podcast that I've done? And because, I'm sincerely asking you because, I know you and...
Sheikh, listen, I'm going to refrain from answering that question because of my personal involvement, right? And I don't think that I can give an answer that would be totally free of my emotions, right? Because, like I said, I'm severely disappointed. I really feel like the brother Daniel has a gift when it comes to the ability to expose certain ideologies and atheism, and basically one of the things that I think that he could be very good at is just an epistemological framework or exposing the epistemological framework of a lot of Western ideologies, so that we start to understand, why do I actually believe what I believe? And why do I accept this as knowledge? Why is the only type of knowledge I accept something that is empirical, or that can be so-called proven through a scientific method, right? I think that he's uniquely qualified based on his education to do that. The thing is, he hasn't, he's not learned Islamically in that sense, right? I mean, you're not going to find him, I don't think anyway, where he's going to pick up a book of fiqh and teach fiqh or tafsir or hadith or so on and so forth. So I think that what has happened, John, I'll summarize.
Sorry to cut you, Sheikh. This is coming back to the original thing you were saying, that, see, we need scholars, and we need scholars to teach Islam. Sheikh, I'm not talking about institutions that answer misconceptions or answer doubts, because I think that's what Yaqeen is. We need institutions that teach ilm, actual...
Listen. I'm with you 1,000%. I am right now as we speak. Okay, I am in an institution that I'm trying to build by Allah, with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's help and aid, and and after Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with the help of many hands, right? Like we're actually trying to build, a 2-year institution, right, where we can systematically teach the people the religion of Islam and have that available for people, online instruction.
Sheikh, I'm not sure if you've been in touch with Medina College in London. I don't know if you've heard of them.
Is that Abdul Wahid?
Abdul Wahid, yeah. Sheikh Abdul Wahid.
Yeah, mashallah. So we go way back.
Mashallah. I recently met him and I went to his institution. I was very impressed, mashallah. They're really pulling out some really gems of students, mashallah.
That's beautiful to know, and I will say that alhamdulillah, in the last 2 years, we've started a systematic program for Arabic learning. We've started a systematic program for Quranic learning. Well, alhamdulillah, we just got our first hafiz. He finished. I want to say it's almost a month ago now. But alhamdulillah, it was the end of June. Yeah, it was the end of June. So we're starting to see some of the fruits of our labor as well, and we moved into the realm of Islamic studies. So I started teaching the etiquettes of talab al-ilm. I've also started teaching usul fiqh, some tafsir, some mustalah al-hadith, and so forth. So, and I've been doing Aqidah classes since I came home. But the reality is that, let me get back to the point here. The point is that many of these people who have become YouTubers or Facebookers or whatever you want to call it, and they've gained a certain level of popularity on social media, people have taken them as sources for knowledge, and they're not. They're not, and I mean they do interesting things online to build up their, the reality is that social media is built on what? Trying to do it fast, be the first one to do it, stay relevant, be on the top of the news and all this other stuff. Social media does not promote deliberation, and knowledge is built on being deliberate, man. The Prophet ﷺ said to the wafd of the Abdul Qais when they came to him, "Inna fika khaslatayn yuhibbuhum Allah." You have two qualities that Allah loves: al-hilm wal-ana. Al-hilm is that you don't get angry quickly, that you're forbearant, that you right. Wal-ana is that you're deliberate. You're not hasty in the way that you move. Social media is the exact opposite of that, right? It's trying to push you to be hasty. So what you see, unfortunately, what you see with a lot of these brothers, man, is that they do things. It's almost like the Arab method. I mean, if you want to be famous, pee in the well as Angie. Just do something that's going to get you a whole lot of attention, right? And then you can work it out. No media is bad media. No press is bad press. Let's just get out there. So I mean, to go back to your original question, which is, should you publish this interview that you've done with Daniel? I don't know what Daniel said in this interview. I personally don't think that anybody should promote him as a person right now. I think that he really needs some time away from the spotlight for his own soul, so that he can start to really look at, okay, what am I going to stand in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with? The honor of a Muslim is sacred. Let's start there. I mean, even the scholars of hadith, right, who are now protecting literally protecting the sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, so that they can come to us as the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, right? Even then, they were very cautious about how they spoke about people, about the ruwat, right? Please, just stay with me for a second. And I'm saying that the honor of your brother in Islam, the honor of your sister in Islam is sacred. You can't just, talk about people without certain knowledge. Now, to go on top of that and make it look like people have said things that they actually haven't said, that's a very dangerous quality. And I'm saying that the brother may need to just step back from social media for a minute, reevaluate his life. If I was to die today, am I comfortable standing in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with this I've said, with that I've done? Okay? And fine. Once you've done your own set of muhasabah, that's between you and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then come back and do things that are going to be beneficial to the ummah.
So, Sheikh, I want to. Okay, I mean, we understand it. Okay, that's Daniel Hakikature, etc. But there are, other people, and many people do have what I feel genuine concerns about some things. For instance, like, okay, even some of Jonathan Brown's articles, it's being discussed at the moment, different people discussing it. Now, these are very academic papers. Who are they actually for, Sheikh? Because the people who are actually suffering with these issues are not going to read them anyway. And it's like, there's so much room for error, right? And misunderstanding what's trying to be conveyed.
John, I think that is a very, very valid point. And I think that in so many ways, we're still learning. And when I say we, I'm not talking about Yaqeen Institute. I'm saying the collective we, as those who are involved in dawah, that we're still really learning a lot about who our audience is. Do we have data to back it up, right? Or is it just anecdotally? This is how I feel. This has been based on my experience, that these people don't understand that. I don't think that, to your point, I don't think that most people are reading most of the articles on the Yaqeen Institute, for example, right? I mean, especially when you start talking about those 40 and 50 pages.
Not until the popular YouTubers pick them up and point the.
Well, the popular YouTubers pick them up, but still nobody's reading them. Still nobody's reading them as in terms of the articles themselves. They're reading these certain points or whatever like that. Now, I will say that there are certain articles that have gotten great traction. The article that Yaqeen Institute did on the Qira'at, the various modes of recitation of the Quran. Last month, there was a big debacle caused by, an interview between a British and an American, similar to what we're doing right now, right? So, based on that debacle, that article was viewed 13,000 times, and that article is solid.
It is very good, very good.
Yes, extremely well written, man. And recently, an article on atheism and radical skepticism, Ibn Taymiyyah's response and Ibn Taymiyyah's epistemological response, tremendous. I'm talking about one of the best articles written on atheism right now, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best. No, this one is phenomenal. It's phenomenal because you're not playing on their court anymore. You're making the atheists play on a different field. You're not playing their game and you're not playing by their rules. It's a very good article, alhamdulillah. And the most recent article that I reviewed, that I found to be, I think, will answer a lot of questions about why Yaqeen does what it does the way it does, is an article written by Dr. Hatim al-Hajj. It's called In Defense of Faith, Guidelines for Islamic Apologetics. I've actually proposed to some of the students of knowledge in my area that we take this article. When I reviewed it, it was between 60 and 70 pages. It's called In Defense of Faith, the Principles for Islamic Apologetics. It is phenomenal, and it goes through some of the pitfalls of Islamic apologetics. And what do we mean when we say Islamic apologetics? Well, it's basically explaining Islam to people who don't agree with you, right? Yeah. So, I mean, I'm sure you're probably familiar with the term Christian apologetics, because that's the more likely term. But let me just say something. So you talked earlier about Yaqeen watering down the religion, right? Not just that,
just the political approach, really.
Just give me a second. So, I mean, there's the issue of LGBTQ, which I think has been overly dealt with. I'm not going to talk about that at all. I think that it's very clear to most people that the LGBTQ issues as a whole, because again, so I've actually proposed that we write a primer for Muslims on how to approach the whole issue of the LGBTQ because lesbians and gays, right, which is the L and the G, they don't actually agree with the T's, the transgenders, and vice versa. Like, that is actually not one movement, but they found political expediency in coming together, right, to push a broader platform. But I think it's very important for us as Muslims because here in the United States, at least, in Canada, it's even worse, by the way. We're basically taught that if you don't agree that they should have rights, that you are against justice, right? I mean, like, this is, and they're not saying it in those many terms, but you're against justice if you don't agree with justice for all, right? Yeah. So there's this type of movement that makes you believe that, look, and I'm not saying, like, wait a minute, what do we mean when we say justice? Does justice mean that you want me to now accept that those behaviors or those set of behaviors as being moral? Well, no, because I don't get to determine what's moral. And neither do you. That's determined by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So that's not for me to determine. Now, in terms of human interaction, the fact that I see somebody that's a transgender or a gay or a lesbian or whatever walking down the street, that doesn't give me the permissibility or doesn't make it lawful for me now to do anything to transgress upon their rights. So if you mean their rights in terms of their right to life, their right to keep their property that they have, and the fact that I can't transgress upon them, then sure, then we support that. But how do we articulate that and how do we talk about that? So I'm not going to talk about that per se. But if we get back to the other issue, which is that it's watering down the religion. I don't think that is a fair assessment of the Institute as a whole. Have there been certain positions that have come up that probably should have been addressed a bit more forcefully, if you will, right? Or a bit more authoritatively? Most likely, yeah, you could probably go through a couple articles or maybe a few and find that type of stuff.
I think, like you said, we in this modern culture now, it's like we've put people in boxes, right? And you have like certain people who have graduated, scholars who have, kind of are pushing the limits, going, way overboard, etc. So I think when something just kind of doesn't sound right, people are very quick to kind of throw someone into the other box.
And again, John, what sounds right to you may be different from what sounds right to me. Because, for example, because I've studied this issue, and I'll give you a perfect example.
Sheikh, by the way, this leads me back to me when I asked you to come to the UK, and you said no. You're focusing on the studying, and this is why you need to come to the UK, because you need to kind of see our point of view as well, kind of understand our situation, because we need people like you to kind of understand us, and we need to send our people over there to understand you guys. Because Sheikh, sometimes we can't recognize.
Hey, and listen, we have enough British people in America, in my opinion, when it comes to du'at. As a matter of fact, you can have him back, Sheikh. You can have him back. No, but on a serious note, what I was going to say was, back in 2006, 2007, I translated several articles by Sheikh al-Bani, Allah yarhamu, Sheikh Abdul Muhsin al-Abbas, Sheikh Musil al-Abbas, Sheikh Luhaydan, others. A bunch of different scholars on the permissibility of voting in the West. Mind you, I did not say a word. All I did was translate what those scholars have said. Your friends in Birmingham put a campaign out. He's an Ikhwani. Why is he Ikhwani? Because he says it's permissible to vote. I didn't say anything. At that point, I never voted in my life. Honestly. I wasn't saying anything. The whole point that I was trying to make is similar to right now, right? Sheikh Tahir Wyatt has a fatwa. It's clear, sun is in the sky, about the permissibility of demonstrating, like as in like attending a demonstration, a protest with certain conditions in the West. He's not talking about what you would do under a Muslim government that does not permit that type of activity. He's talking about in a land where that is the way that your voice is heard, where that is the way that they expect you to communicate with them and show your disapproval of whatever, right? Now, mind you, somebody who doesn't know any better, they've only been taught a certain way, right? You start hearing, oh, so-and-so says permissible to vote, huh? And it's permissible to attend demonstrations. What do? Write them off, put them in a box, right? And just say, something doesn't sound right about that. So I think that what sounds right and what doesn't sound right, and the opposite is also true. Some people just say stuff. I'll give you a very quick example, right? Have you heard this one? The 3 days of Eid? Have you heard that? The 3 days of Eid, period. People say the 3 days of Eid, right? There's no Eid that's 3 days. Eid al-Fitr is 1 day, and Eid al-Adha, if we count the days of Tashriq, is 4 days. There's no such thing as an Eid that's 3 days. So there are certain people who say that. I'm saying from the flip side. For them, it's just very common. We're just going to say that. And then you have to correct them. And they say, wait a minute, what do you mean? So I've been saying this wrong all my life. So my whole point is, what sounds right and what doesn't sound right is very relative. It's very relative to the person. There were several points I was going to make. So let me just go back for a second. Because I do want to just explain very quickly that I was actually asked to join to come on board and work with Yaqeen for this very purpose. So the issue was that initially Yaqeen Institute did 2 surveys, one in 2017 and one in 2018, to try to come up with empirical data about what is causing people doubt. So they enlisted a brother, his name is Yusuf Shahood, Dr. Yusuf Shahood, who's like a data specialist, right? And they brought him on. He now works for a university in the United States. But anyway, they brought him on to do data. He interviewed extensively 40 imams, chaplains in the prison system and chaplains otherwise, like in hospitals and things like that, Muslims, and youth directors. And basically, they came up with what they believed those imams and chaplains and so forth in dealing with the people that they deal with, talk about what was causing people to doubt Islam, right? He did another survey in 2018. The survey that he did in 2018 was of 800 people, and these were just regular Muslims. So he was asking them, have they experienced doubt? What is it that has caused them doubt? And so there's a different set of data. The 2017 data is a little bit different from the 2018 data, and it's because he was introducing or interviewing different sets of folks. My point is that they developed a research schematic based on that data, and it was very, I don't want to say reactionary, but they were responding, right? So they developed several papers. Okay, this is a big topic. Jihad is an issue. Abuse of women is an issue. I'm sorry, I lost my mic for a second. So, several things that they felt were big issues and they began to tackle those. The problem now is that if all I'm doing is responding to doubt, then I become like a doctor who, you just come to me when you get sick and I prescribe you medicine. I'm not telling you how can you prevent becoming sick. You keep getting the same virus or whatever it is. So the other aspect of Yaqeen's areas of research are, 1, dismantling doubt. Number 2 is cultivating and nurturing conviction. And the 3rd is inspiring contribution, inspiring Muslims to contribute to their society as a whole, which is another very important area. But I was specifically, dealing with the issue of nurturing conviction, right? Which is, how do we now build up people's iman so that they're not affected by every single doubt that comes, through their ears or that they see on a TV screen? And so they put me actually in charge of what they called at that point the Systematic Theology Task Force, which was an Aqidah task force, to look at building up people's deen. And then that turned actually into a department right now where I have fellows who are working under me where, through guided research. And this is where, for example, you get this paper about atheism and radical skepticism and how Sheikh Tahir Wyatt dealt with that. This is where you get, now we have several series of papers coming out on the names of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and they're beautiful because we're not just talking about recognizing what the name means, but how do we worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala alone through knowledge of that name? Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَلِلَّهِ الْأَسْمَاءُ الْحُسْنَى فَادْعُوهُ بِهَا. Allah has the most beautiful names. So make dua to Him. That dua, of course, includes ibadah. So how do we worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala through knowing these names? What should we believe about the malaika and about the hereafter? And so it's not just a rehash of, what may already exist on points of aqidah, but it is now taking and rewriting the same points of aqidah that have been written by the scholars of the past, but rewriting them in the language of today to address some of the issues that are prevalent in our society. And this is what every successful scholar has done throughout history. Sheikh Tahir, when he was writing about whether it was Wasiti or Hamawi, he was addressing issues of his time, and he highlighted those. Even Muhammad ibn Abdul Wahhab, rahimahullah ta'ala, when he wrote Kitab Tawheed, that was to address the issues of his particular time. And it's not, obviously, still relevant today. But the point is that, rewriting the creed in a manner that is going to be more in the language of the people who you are addressing. So I'm just saying that to say that, again, if you or anyone else, and even myself, I find mistakes from time to time. I haven't read every single article on Yaqeen. I definitely haven't watched every video. But when I do find things that I feel are questionable, there is a chain that we can, bring that to and say, hey, listen, this is an issue. This needs to be addressed. And I do think that I've seen from across the board, from the leadership at Yaqeen, I've seen a willingness to accept criticism. I really have. They even created a feedback page now where you can go on, if there are any articles, you can go in, you can say, look, this is wrong, this is why it's wrong, A, B, C, and D. We should, stay with me, John, for a second. We should do a very good job of catching that stuff up front and not publishing anything, not putting anything out to people that is going to be questionable. And inshallah, we are doing a very good job at that at this stage. But I'm saying that even if you do find mistakes or you find things that are questionable, I'm telling you from what I know, and I'm telling you on a personal note, I'm open to criticism. Like Imam al-Bukhari, rahimahullah ta'ala, said, he said, if I could spend all of my money to pay people to tell me what my mistakes are, then I would go broke doing so. Right? Because I want to stand in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala free of any of these mistakes. I don't want to have to answer to anything to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for misleading people or sending people astray. So the idea is...
I'll send you my bank details, don't worry.
I'm not paying you. You got to do it for free.
We're going to have to wrap up because Sheikh has to go. And also because, subhanAllah, we promised to come back, inshallah. But Sheikh, before we leave, do you have any final thoughts and points of advice that you can give us as Muslims living in the West, and also kind of how we can, live here and still keep our religion?
So two things immediately come to mind. The first is that our Prophet ﷺ taught us to prepare for a next life. And when the man came to him and asked the Prophet ﷺ, when is the hour? The Prophet ﷺ said, ماذا عددت لها? What have you prepared for? I think that we live in such a materialistic society, a secular society, a society that does not teach us to think about our hereafter at all. We become engrossed in this dunya. And so all of the values of, not all of the values, but many of the values of the society that surround us do not coincide with our own values. And so I guess the first piece of advice is as our Prophet ﷺ said, "Akthiru min dhikri hadim al-ladhat." Remember much the thing that will destroy all pleasures. Live your life preparing for the next life. وَلَا تَمُوتُنَّ إِلَّا وَأَنْتُمْ مُسْلِمُونَ. And don't die unless you are in the state of Islam. Don't die unless you are a Muslim. That would be the first piece of advice. The second piece of advice is how we approach Islam as a whole. And our Prophet ﷺ, as he was leaving this world, was asked by Iqbal in Syria, to leave them with some advice. The Prophet ﷺ said, for those of you who live amongst you, then you're going to see great difference. You're going to see great difference. You're going to see some people who say this is Islam, this is not Islam, and this is the right way, and this is the wrong way, and to the end of it. You're going to see a lot of different. The Prophet ﷺ taught us what we're supposed to do when we see that different. So the Prophet ﷺ said, فَعَلَيْكُمْ. When you see that different, فَعَلَيْكُمْ بِسُنَّتِي. So stick fast, hold fast to my sunnah, adhere to my sunnah, وَسُنَّةِ الْخُلَفَاءِ الرَّاشِدِينَ مَهْدِيِّينَ مِنْ بَعْدِي. And also the sunnah of the rightly guided Khalifas who come after me. Bite down on it with your molars. Notice that the Prophet ﷺ did not just say to follow his sunnah alone, and that would have been sufficient, honestly. But he said also the sunnah of the rightly guided khulafa. Those rightly guided khulafa, they did not receive revelation, so they were not like the Prophet ﷺ in that sense. They had to take what they got from revelation and process it. They had to take what they got from the Quran and from the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ and process it through the broader principles of Islam. And through them, we learn that concept of methodology in approaching text and how to interpret text. So it is very important for us, as Muslims, to continue to learn our deen. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to increase us in knowledge and to benefit us with the knowledge that He has taught us. Allahu a'lam, sallallahu wa sallam wa barak ala nabiyyina Muhammad subhanaka Allahumma wa bihamdika ashhadu an la ilaha illa anta astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk. Wassalamu alaykum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
إنك لا تهدي من أحببت ولكن الله يهدي من يشاء